Welcome to A Quest for Metal. Today we are ranking all of Obituary's albums from my least favourite to my favourite. Now you guys voted for it on the polls and it was kind of a close tie between this and Iced Earth. So I will get to Iced Earth probably next week because I have been listening to them a whole lot because they were winning at first. So I was really expecting to do Iced Earth, but alas, Obituary beat them at the end, so we're doing them. Now usually on some of these rankings I'll say like, oh, all the albums are good, or in the case of like Machine Head, I'll say some of them are good, some are shit. With Obituary, it's more the former. Almost all of Obituary's albums are really good, they pack a punch, but there is one which I'm not that keen on. There's one I'm not that keen on, and then there's three which are easily top. The rest are just kind of like, well, it's pretty good death metal. So let's just get it out of the way. My least favourite Obituary album is World Demise. This may come to a shock to some people because I've seen a lot of lists flying around and this isn't the bottom of people's lists. Sometimes it's usually mid. People usually don't like the zombie one, Back from the Dead, or some of the newer ones. They hate them more, but for me this album's never really clicked. And re-going through the discography past couple of days, it still hasn't really clicked. And I think it's just that intro. It's just the first song, Don't Care. It just sets it off on the wrong mood for this album, where it just feels kind of punky rather than death metal. And it's like, oh, I don't care. I don't like it. Don't like that song. The album as a whole has never really grabbed me. Nothing stood out on this album to me. It's just kind of, it's okay. I wouldn't put this on again. I wouldn't put this on again. The other albums, yeah, I can dig them. It's just this one doesn't really do it for me. Maybe the punky side of it, it just feels off. This album feels off. And I don't like the lyrics either. The lyrics don't like, catchiness isn't there. It's not as brutal as some of the others. So it's going last place. Next up we have the aforementioned album Back from the Dead, which I like a considerable amount. I think this album's still fantastic and people have it last. They're fucking wrong. This album's great from start to finish, but it is lower down because it does lack those, killer songs, those ones that you just remember. The whole album's good, start to finish, but it's not great. It's not like astronomical like some of the others that I'll talk about. This is just kind of good death metal. Good cookie cutter? Good cookie cutter death metal. By the Light, Feed on the Weak, some solid songs on here. I have nothing bad to say about this album. So, from this album to the tip top of the tower, from this album to the tip top of the tower, they're all great and I enjoy them all. So it's just this happens to be the one that's least memorable. So yeah, it's going here, but it's still a great album. Next up we've got Darkest Day. Now, these ones, the midsection, could really be in any order depending on preference, really. Because they're all fairly solid. They're all pretty much on the same level. It's just I've listened to some of the others a lot more than some of the others. And that's basically the only reason. But this is still a great album. I think it's a bit of a step up from Zombie. You got powerful tracks like Your Darkest Day, Fields of Pain, List of Dead. So many good songs on this one. And it's the lyrics I just enjoy more than the World Demise one. I'm not a big fan of that. But this one is a solid death metal album. Obituary has just a lot of solid death metal albums, and this just fits nicely in those catalogue. Next up we have Executioner's Return, which has the most sick album cover. I mean, just look at that. Just look at that. If I'm facing the right way, could be there. I mean, that album cover alone makes me want to bump it up a few spaces, but I'm not going to do that just because of an album cover. The songs themselves are still hard-hitting, still death metal, still the stuff you love, but I think some of the others are catchier in some of the later ones, which we'll get to in a second, and then of course some of the earlier ones, which, spoiler alert, may lead the top of the list, but Executioner's Return still has some great songs here. Face Your God, Drop Dead, Bloodshot, too many good songs on here. It's just, there's better albums, and that's all I can say. I mean, again, this middle section of the list is really hard. You could swap and change some of these, like I could swap this one for, say, like the self-titled, or I could swap Frozen in Time for, like, this one, you know, it's kind of a jumble between the middle because they're all fucking good. But let's carry on. Let's strive through and let's head to the next album. So I just mentioned it, Frozen in Time is my next one, which has an awesome, cool album cover as well. And this is the first Obituary album I listened to. It didn't pull me in straight away though. I had to listen to some of the other ones to pull me in, but re-listening to it, I gotta say, it's actually fantastic. I mean, come on, it has Redneck? It has Redneck Stomp on. You've got to love that song. Blindsided as well and Slow Death. A lot of good meaty songs on this album. But again, in terms of memorability, aside from a couple of songs on here, it's not quite as monolithic as the earlier stuff. But again, also a fantastic album that I'd put on today, and it'll still be a good death metal romp, you know? There's nothing bad about any of these albums. The only album I don't like is the very first one I mentioned. So this is still, you could have this top, and I'd be questioning you, but I can see why. It's still a good death metal album. But it's not the best. So again, let's move ahead. So next up we have the self-titled, the Obituaries Obituary. And every band has to have a fucking self-titled, but this one is fantastic. 2017 this came out, and it's one of the better albums by them in my opinion. I mean, 10,000 Ways to Die is just a classic now, and that music video is just fun as hell, with all the cartoon versions of everyone. Awesome music video. Sentence Day, Brave, there's too many good songs on this one, just like Frozen in Time and some of the other ones, but I just think it sounds better on this album. It just sounds better. The songs are more catchy, and they're more fun. I think they've progressed a lot, and the next album will also kind of reiterate that, which is Inked in Blood. I really like this album. I don't know why. Some people have this lower, but for me, I adore this album. I think it's one of the best of the newer version of Obituary. The album cover, though, it's gruesome. Yeah, this one is just hookier, it's catchier, it's heavier. It's just all-around more cohesive album than some of the other mid-tier albums. I just think it is. It's more cohesive. I think it's a bit heavier, and it sounds better. Visions in My Head is amazing. The title track is amazing. Within a Dying Breed, this song has more bang for your buck than any of the other ones I was mentioning. Like, if you just pass this one off, go re-listen to this one, because Inked in Blood is actually fantastic, and it's probably one of Obituary's best. Now we're getting into the best albums by Obituary. No arguments here. These three are phenomenal. Number 3, we have 1992's The End Complete. An amazing album. It's one of the best. It's why it's number 3. But there's just 2 other albums which are just absolute classics. Classics of the death metal genre, so even though I love this album so much, yeah, they have to go top. But this album just has so many good songs on. The first song on the album, I'm in Pain, kicks it off right into gear. Dead Silence, Sickness. Again, this has way more bang for your buck than the other ones. This is way better than Inked in Blood, way better than all those albums I mentioned. Like, these top 3, you could have in any order top, and I'd be like, yes, good for you. Because The End Complete is a masterpiece of just heavy cookie cutter metal. And it's awesome. And yeah, there's no complaints here for this album. It's just 2 others just have a little bit of an edge. A little bit. So let's get to my number 2. And that is Slowly We Rot. Slowly We Rot, which is one of the most iconic album covers. Not the most, though. We'll get to that. I was tempted to put this top, because I love the kind of slimy, gritty atmosphere this album brings compared to the rest of the albums. Like, this is way different to all the other albums. This is the first album by them, and it feels like super old school death metal, that kind of slime-ridden cave wall you expect in some death metal, and that's my favourite kind. This album delivers, so I was very tempted to put this top. Very tempted. After listening to it, I was like, yeah, this is top. Easily top. Then I listened to the next one, I was like, okay. Okay. But this is still a 10 out of 10. This is still one of the best death metal albums ever. I mean, Slowly We Rot. Come on. Amazing song. Yeah, the album is just filled with evil, gooey death metal goodness, and that's the way I like it. But there can only be only one winner, and today, the winner is Cause of Death. This album isn't as raw, it isn't as, like, slime-ridden as Slowly We Rot. It's probably not, you know, typical, but, and that's a big but, it's the most evil-sounding Obituary album. It's the darkest sounding, and it's probably the most brutal sounding death metal album I have fucking heard. I mean that. Like, just the production, the singing, the guitar, everything just has an evil atmosphere, like a real evil atmosphere, and it's brutal as hell without being comical, you know? This blows, like, Deicide, Cannibal Corpse, any of those albums they could hope to fucking make as evil as this. This is probably the most darkest sounding album in death metal history. I'm gonna go on record and say that. I mean, just go re-listen to it. Like, the sound is perfect. The sound is perfect on this album. It is, and the songs, I mean, come on. Chopped in half. Amazing. Body Bag. Even the Circle of the Tyrants cover, which is better than the original. Yeah, I said it. Celtic Frost is still pretty cool, but this version is just way more evil. Love it to bits. Everything on this album is just better than everything else, you know? It's the best Obituary album, hands down. It's the best sound, it's the best songs, and it's the most memorable, and it's the best artwork. So let's talk about the artwork, because the artwork is just... I think it was like H.P. Lovecraft inspired, maybe one of his artworks, I think I read. And like Sepultura was going to have it for Beneath the Remains, but then they couldn't because Obituary had it. And both amazing albums, by the way. That's my favourite Sepultura album, and my favourite Obituary album. So, it's just bad luck that Obituary got it, but hey. Classic album, classic artwork, one of the best. Let me know in the comments below your favourite Obituary albums. What did you think of my list? What would you change? What's your favourite Obituary song? Let me know in the comments below, and we'll see you again on another Quest for Metal.